Today's guest has advised thousands of businesses on what can they sell for, the levers that increase or decrease. If you own a business, today is a must. Join us. Welcome to Decision Points. I'm Doug Hudson.
I'm Scott Wood.
Welcome Craige Stout, CEO of Stout. How we doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
What got you started off this morning? Did you get up at 5 and do anything, or?
I got up and banged out a few emails, and now I'm here.
Where are you from?
Originally from Michigan.
Okay. Which side of the fence are you on Michigan?
I'm on the Michigan State side of the fence.
Hence, you are in somewhat, well, in the green hues.
Exactly. Although that was a coincidence, but absolutely, I'll take it.
You follow them fairly closely, or not really?
No, I follow Michigan State quite closely.
Yeah.
It's been a tough run for the last several years, but we'll be back.
Did you go to Michigan State, Craig?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Are you glad Harbaugh's out of there? You don't even want to acknowledge. Don't even want to acknowledge. You're like, Harbaugh who?
I don't even care.
I'm indifferent.
So you were born and raised there, and then went to college at Michigan State?
Yeah, I actually grew up in East Lansing. My father was a professor at Michigan State.
Okay.
Of what?
Of agricultural engineering.
No
So
way.
I fell pretty far from the tree.
Yeah, I want to find out. Does
yeah.
he have a farming background in his family?
Yeah, he was from Nebraska and grew up on a farm, and all he knew was that he didn't want to be a farmer. Stayed in the vicinity in terms of being involved with agriculture.
So were you born in East Lansing and then your whole life raised there through high school?
Because my father was a professor, I did a stint in Italy because he had a sabbatical there, and another stint in California. But grew up in East Lansing. Most kids move away from their folks. My parents moved away from me when I graduated from college, and he actually became a professor at Texas A&M.
Oh, no way.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then I stayed up in East Lansing and went to Michigan State.
You have siblings?
I have one sister, 2 years older.
Yeah.
She's in Boise, Idaho now. Although she did some time in Texas, she spent at least a decade in Dallas, and then ultimately she and her husband and kids moved to Boise, and she's been there for 20 plus years.
Yeah, some of our best friends, we lived in Dallas 30 years. We moved to Fayetteville, Arkansas 8 or 9 years ago, but some of our best friends moved to Boise. It's been blowing up, too.
Yeah.
It just seems like if you like outdoors, it's so accessible to so much.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Obviously, I get up there occasionally.
Yeah.
It's growing like a weed, and there's a lot to do.
Yeah, yeah.
I still like Dallas more, but
Yeah, well, Dallas is a tremendous place for the people in business. We're not quite as aesthetic as Boise, but you can get to the stuff pretty quickly.
We do like a little aesthetic, but that's all right.
the ski slopes are farther away.
That's
here.
Yeah, they are.
That's
But,
right.
You know, we named this Decision Points, Craig, for several reasons, but there's always those personally and professionally decision points that you go, you touch the hot stove, or there's indelible mark left on you. Any of those come to mind?
I mean, I had a pretty normal childhood, so I can't point to these terribly controversial things that came up at all. I will say I grew up playing hockey. As I reflect, I feel like half the things that I apply in life now are from my schooling and upbringing, and the other half are from playing hockey.
Okay.
And I guess the reason I would say that is it's a team game.
Yep.
And generally speaking, on a hockey team, the socioeconomic spectrum is super wide.
Yeah.
You could have players that are whose folks work on the assembly line, and you could have players whose folks are brain surgeons.
Yep.
And for me, that was really instructive in terms of how to deal with people and deal with different people all the time. So that's probably the biggest thing. And it taught me some work ethic too, because I wasn't that talented.
What are some of those tools you learned about dealing with different people?
Well, I think the first thing is just different people are different, and what motivates one individual may not motivate another one the same way. There's certain people that respond to, being coached hard.
Yeah.
And there's other people that don't respond to being coached hard. They respond to being, loved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I can't say that I've perfected all those skills, but I definitely have leaned on them over the years.
The quarter zip color is, tell me, for the Dallas Stars. Are you a Stars fan, or where are you on the allegiance here?
Yeah, I'm definitely.
Because we're filming this. The Stars just won the second game of the second round. Yeah. So
I'm a season ticket holder.
Okay.
I am a Red Wings fan, but it's easy to be a Dallas fan and a Detroit fan because Red Wings haven't seen the playoffs in years. But no, I'm definitely a Stars fan.
But if they were head to head, it's going to the homeland. It's going to Detroit.
Yeah, exactly. I'd have to go back to the Big Red.
Hockey's one of those things that, like, I wish hockey was a thing in Dallas when I was in middle school and high school. It just wasn't. I think there's one rink, maybe two, and there was a league, but it was nobody played hockey. I mean, and then the Stars came here. In the, I guess that would have been the early '90s.
Yeah, we had to be in our mid-20s when they.
And when they came, then hockey began to grow. And I heard a stat the other day that there's, X number of rinks and leagues and teams, and the Stars are behind a lot of that financially as well. But I've always loved to watch hockey. I was like, if I could have a do-over, I would have played hockey just because it looks like so much fun. Like, from a skill perspective, not only do you have to have the stick skill, but you got to be able to skate.
Yeah, it's like soccer. You just have to know how to skate too.
Yeah. Did you contemplate playing in college or?
Yeah, I did. I tried.
You tried, yeah.
But at some point you realize your skill level, your natural skill level, and others start to spread apart a little bit.
Particularly in a place like Michigan State. I mean, competition there.
I had to figure out how to make money. And it wasn't going to be playing hockey.
Yeah, you learn the difference between a hobby and a profession.
Exactly.
So at that point, hockey became a hobby, and you had to figure out a profession.
Exactly.
So did you know, growing up, for sure, you were going to Michigan State? Was that pretty much you look anywhere else?
Yeah, I looked at the University of Michigan, and at the time, West Point, because they had a hockey program, and a few others. But generally speaking, I definitely wanted to go to Michigan State.
Walk us through there. What'd you study? Did you know early on a trajectory and what you wanted to pursue, or what was that journey like for you, Craig?
So I'm sure, like many, my thought process on majoring in accounting, fairly simple.
Yeah.
My sister majored in accounting. And so I said, well, she's pretty smart. So I decided to major in accounting. And, in retrospect, it's a wonderful major because, one, if you do relatively well in school, it's almost guaranteed employment when you get out.
Yeah.
And two, in terms of public accounting, and from a public accounting background, there's just so many directions you can go, and you can learn so much. So it turned out to be a great choice. But I can't give myself a lot of pats on the back.
That's the difference between you and me. My brother studied accounting, and he moved back home. We were fairly spread apart in years, 8 years apart. I watched my brother study for the CPA, and I was like, nah, there's no way.
Doing that.
Yeah.
There's no way.
Well, and I think, like, when you start in accounting, like, you either love it or you're like, no thanks, this is not for me. Because I had to take a couple of accounting courses, and I was like, I don't love it.
No.
I mean, I can do it, but I don't love it.
Well, I wasn't a natural. I remember another person in one of my classes that wasn't a natural said, if you think it's a credit, it's a debit. And if you think it's a debit, it's a credit. And that's a little bit how I thought for the first 6 months. But over time, I got the hang of it.
I was never diagnosed with dyslexia, but I think I have some because I always struggled with that concept.
I still don't know which one it is. So, well, and it is, but to your point, it is a tremendously, it's foundational to every single business.
Yeah.
I mean, where's the money? How's it getting there? How's it going out? How do you balance? It's critical. And then obviously getting much more strategic and proactive with it.
Before we go further, did your mom work, or was she
So my mom
into the university?
Was also to some degree an academic. She had a master's in education and ultimately taught high school math. And then when she was at A&M, she taught college math.
Okay.
So yeah, she was into it.
So both parents in the education world. Yeah.
They were really smart. And then, there's always, it misses a generation. And that,
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I don't know about that.
You're sitting here, it sounds like your sister's brilliant as well. And you started your own business and you've had it for a long time. So I think Now, maybe you were a little bit more entrepreneurial than your mom and dad, but so walk us through college and then kind of first job and career after Michigan State.
For me, college was a grind. My parents, and I think they did me a real service here. They didn't pay for, now back then you could do that because it wasn't a gazillion dollars, but they didn't pay for my school. So, and I was probably a little bit headstrong and independent, so I kind of didn't really want their help. I always had their love, but in terms of finances just laying around everywhere, they weren't really that helpful, which made me pretty independent, pretty young.
You learned that fairly early, probably junior high, high school. You realized that where did that start? A revelation start to happen?
Yeah. So maybe this is an inflection point that I forgot about, and this is the difference between my father and me. Rest in peace. He's passed on. But in 5th grade, my buddy had a paper route.
Okay.
He had like a 55 paper route. It was pretty big, and that was in the old days when you lugged those things around and
in the big bag.
Yeah.
Double bicycle or no bicycle?
Too many for a bike.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, he decided he didn't want the route anymore.
Yeah.
And turned out there was another neighbor of mine and I that both wanted the route. So we got in a bidding war. And I think I bought the route for $50. And my dad was appalled. He was just like, how could he sell a route to you? And I'm like, I think I got a good deal, $50. And so, yeah, that was really my first, that and lawn jobs.
What was the multiple of monthly revenue?
Yeah, exactly.
I think it was pretty low. I think it was like 1 times EBITDA, or less. So
that's a pretty good deal.
From that perspective, it was very accretive.
I love this because clearly you do remember it, and it was a decision. What was the starting asking price? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, but I do remember. I was the winning bidder at $50.
That's awesome.
But you learn so much with a paper route. I remember, to this day, I don't remember the woman's name, or I would mention it on this podcast. But I got a little bit behind on collections, and I walk up to this house, and you owe $12 or something for 3 months of. She goes, there's no way I owe that. I paid you. And I'm like, well, no, the tabs
it's all in paper and the little tabs.
That lesson sticks with me today. If you let your receivables get past 90 days, it starts getting weird.
Good luck.
Right? It's going to get weird. That's such a great example.
And I'll never forget, I walked back out that driveway just like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like she basically said she's not paying.
Right.
And I didn't know what to do.
Right.
So, I ate it. It was my first bad debt.
Yeah.
And did you stop sending the paper to her?
No, I didn't. I can't remember what I did, but I remember walking by that house pretty pissed off for a while.
Yeah.
I have to ask, have you seen the movie Better Off Dead? And do you know, you have to go to YouTube or watch it. It's Better Off Dead, John Cusack, long time ago. This kid has a paper route to John's house. And he said, the theme is through the whole movie. He keeps finding John on the ski slopes at like a diner, and he walks up to me and says, he's like a 10-year-old kid to like a 25-year-old guy. I want my $2.
Yeah.
Because he owes him $2 for the paper route.
I was at a dinner recently, and it was a bunch of YPO guys, I think, and everybody went around the table and was like, what was your first commercial endeavor?
I love it.
And probably about half the guys and gals around the table is a paper route. And it's funny because I didn't have my own paper route, but I had a buddy that had one. And so when he would go on vacation or out of town or needed help or whatever, I would fill in. And I'd totally forgotten that I'd done that until we went around the table that day. And I was like, oh, I remember folding the papers and sticking them in the bag. And then we actually did it on a bike for a while. And so we had a bike with a big basket over the front handlebars, and you're tossing the paper. So it's kind of interesting.
You learn how to fold those babies and wing them,
And we always had like a little competition about who could fold the most papers the fastest, because it was all about time management too, because it's early in the morning.
But accuracy counts too.
Yeah.
Who was most that? What's great about this is, Scott, we've had this conversation one other time. It was such an entrepreneurial endeavor, and you're learning things, customer service, collections, all those kind of things. So
and you think about like that today, like you're out collecting you're collecting the monthly deal. That's, I guess there's probably an auto pay somehow, or people could send in the check. But if they didn't send in the check, you had to go knock on the door, collect the money. I remember it was like a paper that had like 12 tabs on it, and you would tear off the tab as the receipt. And there's a very, very manual, but like our kids don't really have anything like that today to be able to go and do.
Yeah. Well, the other one too, I remember when we lived in Chicago and our kids were, 10, 12 years old, I'm thinking, well, they should get lawn jobs.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
There aren't any lawn jobs. If you walked up and knocked on the door in the neighborhood we lived in, they'd be like, well, first of all, there's liability issues. There's no way I'm going to let you, with a power tool on my lawn. Mm-hmm. Wow. And second of all, I've got a company that does it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's just a different time. Now, maybe it's like that, in more rural areas.
Yeah.
But
You're Michigan State, you're figuring out what's this early career look like for you?
I was an accounting major, and like many schools, Michigan State did a good job of getting the employers to see the potential employees. And so went to a bunch of mixers and got out of school and ended up getting a job with Pricewaterhouse in Chicago. And I went directly into what they called their valuation services group, which was, again, a little bit of serendipity. I thought I was going to be a tax accountant.
Okay.
And the day I walked in, they're like, hey, we got this new group. It's growing like a weed. We need you to go up to that. And I remember I'm thinking, I just got baited and switched. Like, what's going on? But of course, yes, where do you want me to go? I'll be there. And, and as it turned out, I loved it. It was a wonderful experience, and I was there about 5 years.
Did you end up getting a job through college to help pay for school? That may be where we were going on that. I want to touch on that.
Yeah, I left that out. So one of my best friends from high school, he and his brother started a video arcade business, which still exists, called Pinball Pete's in East Lansing and Ann Arbor. So I started, just working in the stores. And then with my accounting background, by my junior year, they said, hey, would you
keep the books?
Would you be interested in taking over the accounting? So I did the accounting, and I didn't do the tax work. They obviously learned a ton from that. And, frankly, that helped pay the bills. And I actually bought a house after my freshman year and had, three roommates in it, which was another great experience. It was a 600 square foot house, 4 bedrooms. It was like our little fraternity house, although we probably kept it a lot cleaner than your average fraternity house.
So, and you can say this now because it's probably been 20 or 30 or more years. Like, did you pay any rent, or did the 3 roommates pay 100% of your?
The way it worked out
your debt service?
Is, I pretty much lived for free.
That's what I thought.
But you took the risk.
But they all knew it. I mean, everybody was getting a great deal.
Yeah.
I mean, I think rent was $135 a month plus utilities.
Yeah.
How'd you come up with a down payment from Pete's?
My grandmother loaned it to me.
Okay.
I think it was like $3,000 or $5,000.
Nice.
Keep in mind, this was a $29,000 house.
Yeah. What were the terms?
I don't remember.
Sweetie, just pay me back.
I think it was interest free, and then I did pay her back.
That's great.
When we sold the house.
It's awesome.
So enterprising from the beginning.
I absolutely. And this is what we love, these kind of storytelling lines. Your grandmother loaned you. Did you go to her? Did she come to you? Because obviously it sounds like...
No, I went to her.
You went to her. Because you weren't going to go to your dad.
Well, with the advice of my folks, they said, well, why don't you ask your grandmother? Yeah. So I did. And she graciously loaned me the money.
Fantastic.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So, So anyway, that was a great experience, but it was hard. Like, in retrospect, I got so much out of it, but it would have been a heck of a lot easier to live in the dorm. And, I probably would have made a lot more friends from college had I done that. But I may have not gotten the grades, and who the heck knows? So I'm not second guessing anything.
And I think obviously, I think you would agree with this. If you don't, you'll push back. But hard things is where we grow. So you may not have taken the easier path, but you ended up learning so much. A down payment, collecting rent from, just all those other things that you pick up from that. All right, so you moved to Chicago. Tell us about, you're married and you got kiddos?
Yep. I'm married 25 years this coming January, which is just starting to register on me, but I've got to come up with a game plan for that. But
what's her name?
Molly.
Molly.
And then we have 3 kids, 2 boys, 22 and 20, and a girl that's 17.
What are the kids into?
Our oldest just graduated from Indiana University, and he's headed to law school.
Okay.
Our middle son is a math and computer science major at UNC Asheville, and our daughter is graduating from Highland Park in 2 weeks and then going to Wisconsin.
Isn't it cool how they're kind of migrating? Obviously, Asheville's not, but back to the Midwest.
Well, our oldest son, we moved to Dallas 5 years ago, and the timing of the move was basically the day after he graduated.
Gotcha.
So it was a little bit more natural for him to go to Indiana. And then our middle son ended up in North Carolina.
Yeah,
and
beautiful. Obviously,
he loves it there.
Asheville, yeah.
And our daughter's a rower.
Okay.
So she's going to row at Wisconsin.
Did she row for DRC, Dallas Rowing Club, out at White Rock, or did she?
Dallas United.
DUC.
Yeah.
DUC, thank you. Yeah. That's great.
Are they big competitors?
No, I think I just got it wrong.
Okay. There's only one. Yeah.
I think I just got it wrong. But obviously HP doesn't have a rowing team. So if you're an HP rower, it's a club.
It's a club.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that rowing. It's hard to get in a lot of trouble when you're up at 5 a.m.
It's hard work too.
6 days a week.
Yeah. My oldest daughter rowed for 2 years, and it's work.
It's commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So walk us through. So you spent how many years in Chicago with?
I spent 2 years in Chicago with Pricewaterhouse, and then got transferred to Los Angeles with Pricewaterhouse. So
when did you and Molly meet? Just real quick.
We met in the mid 90s, well after Pricewaterhouse.
Much later. Okay. So when we get to that point, fill us in on that.
Cumulatively spent 5 years at Pricewaterhouse.
Okay.
A little over 2 in Chicago and a little over 2 in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So how was LA when you got there?
LA was great. Maybe a little misunderstood because the business community actually works really hard.
Yeah.
And everybody just
assumed Hollywood.
Did you surf a lot? I'm like, no, I didn't surf a lot. I
went to the
very
office.
hard. And I actually, at the time, within the valuation group, was in the entertainment group. So I worked in entertainment, which is also an extremely complex, interesting business. On the business side, I mean, it's very complex.
What are some of the businesses that you helped do valuation on in the entertainment space?
One of the things we were doing was valuing film libraries for collateral for financing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess I valued almost every movie made prior to 1980.
No way.
Wow.
Because these libraries just churn. And my first project was Sony's acquisition of CBS Records, which was fascinating.
Yeah, you're trying to value that backlist of every single album and song they have and put a future valuation on that.
Yeah, and it's all about future cash flows. Mm-hmm. So you have to...
Absolutely fascinating. Yeah. It fascinates me. I was in the media business for a long time. Then Spotify comes along and how all that helps set, I guess, certain bars for all of that, right, Craig?
On that, sure. Craig, how familiar are you now with kind of what's happening with these music libraries and movie libraries where it's being fractionalized and, the every man investor can...
There's others at our firm that are familiar, but I'm pretty long in the tooth at this point.
Yeah.
I basically don't know any music post 1990.
Except for Taylor Swift.
Well, I'm aware of Taylor Swift, of course, yeah.
She's become the barometer at this point.
We talked about Taylor Swift at my dinner table last night.
It's hard not to these days. What are some of your takeaways from those 5 years at Pricewaterhouse? What are lessons learned? Lessons like, when I start my own firm, and I know you may not be thinking at that point, but I won't do this, I will this. What are you learning?
I think the biggest thing I learned, and I impart this to our people now, to the junior people that start, approach your job like you want to become the CEO of the business. And I remember this, it's just ingrained in my mind. Pricewaterhouse had this orientation program for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and all the new people are there. They're all super bright. They're all accounting grads. And there was always a few people in there that would say, well, I'm going to get my CPA and then I'm going to do something else. They'd openly say that.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about it was when you looked at the person that left and became the CFO at Disney or the CFO at Kellogg, or, you name it. They were the people that you're like, holy moly, did you hear that Jane left? And she would have never left. I mean, she, at the time that Pricewaterhouse's logo was blue. She bled blue, And yet, as I think back to the people that said, I'm going to work here a couple years and do something else, they all did, but they all left for unremarkable roles. And if I were to guess, their career has probably been fairly unremarkable. So I tell that to our people as well. Like, you got to go into it being super gung-ho, and you don't know what is going to happen and what doors are going to open, but almost without question, better doors will open, whether they're, at the organization that you're at or at a different one.
That's such great messaging. And I think particularly for today, because I feel like, we're, much more mobile. People move around a lot more. They, it's not, I'm not going to join a firm and be
instant
there for
gratification,
20 or 30 years. And, I'm thinking about our team. We've got a really young team, and, how do we encourage them and incentivize them and coach them to think long? Yeah. We had Rand Stegan on the podcast this week also, and Rand talks about this concept of decading, thinking in terms of not 1 year, 2 year, but let's think in terms of 10 years.
Yep.
Which, when you're a young person, that's really hard to do, because 10 years seems like a really long time.
Yep. I guess I learned this from my folks because they were always big travelers and had moved a few times, was don't be afraid to move.
Yeah.
And which is different than don't be afraid to change careers. So
well said.
At Pricewaterhouse, I was in Chicago, and they were asking people at levels much higher than me, please move to LA. We need people to move to LA. And I'm watching this and going to lunches, hearing people say, I would never move to LA. Traffic's horrible, this or that.
You're thinking it's sunny. I can surf.
It could be a quick career advancement.
I'm kind of just taking it all in.
Yeah.
And then ultimately they got down to a very junior person like me, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. What bad's going to happen? And I felt like I learned so much from that experience of living in a different area of the country. Reestablishing new relationships, all those kind of things. And so I'm always encouraging people at our firm, like, give it a shot, move.
Absolutely. Like, increase your network.
You'll do nothing but learn and be stronger for it.
Yeah.
Great. It's great advice. That concept of blossom where you've been planted. And I love your phraseology. Take every endeavor like you're the CEO of that organization, because it's a great word picture. It allows them to project out 20, 30 years, and it's an empowering concept. So it's a great takeaway. Okay, so 5 years or so, plus or minus, you're in LA. What's next?
The longer story is I left because I wanted to do a roll-up in the laundromat business. The shorter story is that didn't go as I had planned, and so then I teamed up with a former colleague from Pricewaterhouse, and we started the firm we have now, which is, at the time, was basically just doing valuation work.
Okay.
But I will, without you asking, I will say the biggest thing I learned from that misstep was I tried to do two things at the same time, because I had a roommate in LA who was in audit, and his dad had a software company. He goes, well, why don't you rep our software in the Midwest? Because I was going to move back, and you can do the laundry thing at the same time. And I'm thinking, yeah, that'll be perfect. I'll put a few bucks on the on the table and pretty quickly you realize I'm doing two things.
Poorly or mediocre.
Not at 100%.
Right.
And so that was a huge learning lesson. But anyway, it all worked out, and ultimately ended with us starting the firm we have now.
Okay, so when you leave, do you move back to Chicago and do these two things? Or are you doing this in LA? Where are these two? Where's the laundromat and
the laundromat stint started in the Bay Area because I needed to learn the software to then go back to the Midwest to be the Midwest rep. So I did spend 6 months in the Bay Area, 6 miserable months trying to learn software and cold call. Longer term, because I am from Michigan, we started the firm in the Detroit area.
So at what point, when you're at Pricewaterhouse, does this entrepreneurial thing, my guess is somewhere in there, you're like, I feel out of place because I have this entrepreneurial sort of itch and I can't scratch that itch here. Like, when did that start to surface, and how did it surface?
I would say it surfaced
Like day one, almost.
No, it surfaced back in the paper route.
Oh,
days.
yeah.
I mean, I always felt
always
like
knew.
I'm going to own a business.
Yeah.
And at Pricewaterhouse, again, it was a great experience, but I was always in the back of my mind, like,
What else can I do?
Ooh, that's interesting how that person's making money, or that's a way to make money, or whatever. So it was
You're
just
viewing
an itch.
all those through the lens of where's my shot, so to speak, to go build something.
Exactly.
Well, and the great thing about where you were is you got to look at lots of businesses.
Absolutely.
You know, you got sort of focused on entertainment the last couple of years, but you know, you get to look across industry, you get to look across businesses, you get to see how different people do it, and really educational from
And
that
that continues to this day. I mean, we do 5,000 valuation projects a year as a firm. And the most incredible, I mean, you look around this room, somebody made this.
Absolutely.
Somebody made this. Somebody made the metal around this table. I mean, it just never ends.
Never ends.
In terms of the supply chain and
Innovation.
the ability to make money.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or lose it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So have you met Molly yet, or?
Yeah. So I came back to the Michigan area and I met Molly in the mid 90s, kind of 5 years in to starting our business.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you and Molly meet? How do you meet?
We met at a wedding.
Love at first sight?
Well, for me, for her, it probably took her a few years to kind of
acquired taste.
I mean, is this on video? I mean, like take a look. It's a tough sell, but I'm pretty good at selling.
That's awesome. All right, but you're 5 years in to walk us through those first couple foundational years. What are you learning? What successes, what mistakes are you making?
Well, we're making a million mistakes.
I like specifics. I like
maybe I'll just back up and tell you a story. So we're out meeting, all the referral sources and different folks that would send us business. And they're like, this is interesting. Did this literature, did you guys come up with this yourself? He goes, yeah, we put it together. And, we're walking away, driving away in cars going, yeah, they really liked our stuff. And basically they were like, this looks so horrible.
Terrible.
Like you didn't actually pay someone to put this together.
Right.
So over time we got a little more sophisticated.
On your marketing and branding.
Yeah. I mean, it was just one of those things where we came from a great training ground. We knew what we were doing. We just needed at bats.
Yeah.
And when we did work, it turned into more work, and then the work got bigger. But in the early days, it was that famous line of people, decision makers being afraid to hire us because we're not IBM.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so you had particularly mid-level people going safe.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with Big Co. I'm going to, and we're, it was super frustrating, but it's gotten easier and easier over time. And never easy, but it's gotten easier than it was.
Craige, who are the first 2 or 3 clients that hire you, and what was the job you did for them?
A buddy of mine that was a lawyer said, look, you can do some work for this client of mine, but they're not going to pay much. So we decided, well, let's just take it on because we need to get all of our processes and systems together. So we basically did it for free.
Yep.
And then, shortly thereafter, we started doing real work. I mean, a typical valuation's, 20, 30, 40, 50,000 for a closely held company. Mm-hmm. So 250 was at quite a discount.
Yep.
And I'm trying to think of the name of the client right now, but I can't. It's
Do you know what they did?
They were in the police cruiser refurbishment business.
Interesting.
Speaking of every form of a business there is.
Which was quite lucrative, as I recall.
I'm sure. So you started this with a buddy from PwC.
I did. And then I'll fast forward a little bit. Coopers and Lybrand came along and wanted to buy us after 5 years. I didn't want to do it, and my partner at the time did. So I made the decision to buy him out. And then I convinced another gentleman from Pricewaterhouse, a guy named Jeff Recius, to come on board in 1996. And he was a lifesaver because we were, to some degree, imploding. Mm-hmm. Coopers had taken half of, through mutual agreement, they had taken half the people we had. We had 17 people at the time, but the work didn't slow down. So, and our most experienced person beyond me had like 7 months experience. So it was nuts. So I had to convince this guy, Jeff Recius, to come on board.
So what year did you start the firm?
91.
91. So in 96, you had the split. Half the people go to Coopers. Your partner at the time goes to Coopers. You buy them out, you get a new partner, and now you're 9 people, 1996.
We are 9 people.
You're still in Detroit.
In 96, yeah. And then it just began. I guess the good news, those first 5 years, there was a lot of foundation laid. I mean, I think when Jeff joined, we did $1.6 million that year of revenue.
Yeah.
We grew every year. It was like $1.6 million, 3, 4, 6, 9. By 2000, we were, 10 plus million of revenue. By 2010, we were 30 million of revenue. By 16, we were 100 million of revenue. So it was a long, slow process, but it began to snowball and just accelerate. And it's continued to do that today, thank God.
And so today, you're how many employees, how many offices?
So we've got
you mentioned revenue if you want to.
We have about 1,000 people in 25 offices, both here in the U.S. and in Europe and Asia. We'll do probably around 450 this year. So it took us 25 years to get to 100. It took us 5 to double it.
Interesting.
Yeah. And now,
isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And now, we did bring in private equity money, which in 21. And so at the time we were 200, and, a little over 2 years now will be 450.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So the PE fund, Audix, has been extremely, instrumental and helpful in getting us to where we're at.
I want to back up one sec because it's curious to me. How did you and your original partner value the portion for you to buy him out at?
Oh, that was a shoemaker's son or daughter type situation.
Back of the envelope.
Basically just book. It was so small still. It's just like, okay, the receivables are this.
Okay. So that was a fairly simple, amicable process.
Do you guys still keep in touch?
Occasionally.
Occasionally, yeah.
He ended up going back to Coopers, which then turned into Pricewaterhouse Coopers.
Yeah.
And I think he just retired last year from PwC.
All right, so let me jump ahead a little bit, and then we may backtrack a little bit, because you mentioned Audix is the PE firm, and you said they've been very helpful. What are 1, 2, or 3 pragmatic things that you can point to and say they improved us by X, by doing this or that?
When we made the decision to get more aspirational and bring in institutional capital, which frankly helped some of the partner, we had at the time 175 shareholders, so it helped some take some chips off the table, level set some risk. We set out to find a partner, and this is a big thing around PE. You hear bad stories about PE, but there's wonderful stories about PE too. You just have to find.
That's right.
It's like getting married. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I appreciate you saying that, because the typical party line is, PE bad.
Yeah.
Run, exactly.
Yeah. So when we ran our process, we said, look, we're looking for a firm that can help us in areas that we just don't have the requisite experience. And the main area was inorganic growth. For the most part, we had grown organically. So we're looking for that, but we're also looking for a firm that's not looking to fix what isn't broken. And, look, all the firms, they're good. They say that what you want to hear, right? But then you've got to kind of cut through it and make sure you find the firm that really is interested in truly partnering. So where they helped the most was...
Before you go there, Craig, sorry to interrupt. Did you guys hire an advisor?
We did. We used
run a process and
by the way, we have a investment bank, but we hired William Blair because you don't do surgery on yourself.
Yeah.
At least I don't think that's a good idea.
I bet you that's why Scott asked the question. That's wisdom. That's you got objective eyes and thoughts and process on your own business.
Yeah. So William Blair was great. Although we're still great, if anybody's wondering.
At the top of the funnel, how many firms started in the process with
probably Blair? About 50.
Okay.
There was 50 logical players in the professional services space that made sense. Remember back in 21, though, it was the go-go times. It was crazy. So I would say 25 of those firms almost immediately said, we're too busy. We've got too much going on. We can't process another deal. Yeah. But ultimately, we got down to 4 firms, and it was interesting because, some of the firms were like, we're going to be so hands-off. Like, you don't have to worry about anything. And then some of the firms didn't say it, but we felt like, maybe they're going to be a little too hands-on and try to fix what isn't broken, as I alluded to. Audix was kind of right in the middle. Just, we have tons of infrastructure. We can help you process deals. We can help. We have all these operational people that can help, but it's It's a pull, not push strategy. Grab what you need when you need it. And we felt like we wanted to be pushed, particularly in areas that we didn't know what we didn't know.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to, have our culture changed and things like that. And they've been wonderful.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important to run a process. From our perspective, we get calls all the time. Somebody's contacted us. Can you just, let's just do this quick. Just make sure the number's right. And it's just not the way to do it.
That's right.
You've got to run a process. You've got to have that competitive tension in there. And frankly, you've got to, have the ability to take the time to really understand who you're contemplating marrying.
Yeah.
Because that's really what it is.
That's exactly right.
And so learned just a ton in that process. They've been great. But the other thing I've learned is, because it's PE, we'll do another deal here. We'll flip them out. Our goal is to 3X the business when they're here and then find a new partner. And so there's probably 30 partners that make sense this time around as we're a little bit bigger. And I'm endeavoring to meet every single one of them on an informal basis. And it's really instructive.
Yeah.
I mean, they give you tons of, just through their questions, you start to understand, well, what are their value drivers? Because you better be aligned with what their value drivers are if you want to maximize, value and find the right partner.
So I'm curious, and maybe just before you answer the question, give our listeners an overview of the whole business of Stout, because we've talked a lot about valuation, but there are some other things that you guys do. So talk about that. But then you just mentioned the M&A advisory work that you do. So you do that work, but yet you were struggling with inorganic growth, or you needed a partner to help with that. So that's kind of the part two of the question. So
the reality though is, it's ironic. We counsel people on how to maximize value,
right?
But that's a heck of a lot different than buying a firm and integrating it, right? And that's where Audix has just been massively helpful. Like, okay, we've bought 5 companies since they joined us. We've got actually 4 under LOI as we speak right now, so it's kind of crazy. But they've just been super helpful in just the process. Like, this is how it works, and we want to integrate them. The whole point here is not to have an amalgamation of companies that aren't communicating and collaborating.
Well, what's so instructive about that is you have the intellectual capital in-house, but you're like, no, we're going to go get a partner to do this with us, help us with it, even though we, theoretically you could do it yourself.
Theoretically, we could do it ourselves badly, and so we're trying to avoid mistakes. What was the first part of the question?
The flyover on the overall business. So we got valuation, we got M&A advisory.
We are a global professional services firm specializing in corporate finance, which is really everything around a deal. Valuation, we'll value anything, anywhere, for any reason of any size. To what we call transaction advisory, which is basically quality of earnings, sell side and buy side QV work, to what we call accounting and reporting advisory, which is basically everything that the auditor can't do. So the auditor might say, your lease accounting is a mess. You're going to run the risk of, missing your filings. You need some help with that. But they can't do it because they're the auditor.
Right.
So it's very synergistic and complementary with the CPA firms, even though we're not a CPA firm.
Right.
And then our last business, which hopefully your viewers don't ever have to deal with, is what we call disputes, claims, and investigations, which is where we act as financial and forensic expert witnesses in commercial litigation. This is where at cocktail parties, people start looking over my shoulder like, I got to get away from this guy because I don't know what he just said. Believe me, it's not, I wish I could say I was a fireman or something at these. The dispute stuff is very synergistic with valuation. And the valuation work is very synergistic with all these other things in the deal ecosystem. So there is a method to the madness of the businesses we're in.
I have a feeling if I'm listening right now, and with the amount of reps and the growth and the expertise that you all have, and obviously a huge part of our listeners with Decision Points, they're business owners. So, Craige, take a few minutes, and we love to paint the word picture of You got 1,000 business owners, revenue somewhere between $15 and $300 million. What I know is a lot of difference. And they're thinking about selling. So walk them through some best practices, the hard questions they might need to be asking themselves or their team.
Or the biggest mistake you see.
Biggest mistake. Coach them up on
blind spot.
So it's interesting. We host a private equity conference every year, and we invite many of our valuation clients to come to it. And they're like, their first reaction is, well, I'm not for sale, so this isn't for me. And we're like, no, you don't get it. This is absolutely for you, because the worst thing you're going to do is learn best practices on how to enhance the value of your business. Mm-hmm. And the PE firms are in there. Obviously, they would hope that you might be interested down the road, but and some become that, so it's worth it to them.
Right.
I think the first thing is people don't think ahead enough.
Yeah.
And it's just, and it starts with, have I done my estate planning to really position this thing so if I do a deal, I'm not just getting hammered with taxes above and beyond what is my, what I need to pay.
Yep.
It starts there. The second thing is, in a perfect world, it's a 3-year plus process of like, okay, maybe we could pursue some outside liquidity, whether it's for a liquidity event or it's for growth capital or whatever. How is our business structured right now? Is it structured in a way that's going to be appealing for that?
Yeah.
And that's where to begin talking with advisors early on about, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? You can get all kinds of, frankly, free advice on what to think about, what to do along those lines. So, are your margins consistent with the industry? Do you have an over-reliance on key customers? Do you have key person risk? Have you really thought about the succession? Sometimes you've got the older generation saying, well, I want to sell. It's like, okay, well, nobody's going to want to buy this if you just want to cash out. Particularly private equity. I mean, maybe a strategic of yours. So I just think there's, all kinds of things like that are mainly common sense, but if you don't think about it in a structured, longer term way, it turns into a bit of a mess. Mm-hmm. And as I said, we get calls. There's 2 calls we get all the time. One is, I need a valuation and I need it right now.
Yeah.
Like, well, let me just ask a question. Are you currently marketing the business for sale? Well, why do you need to know that? The IRS in retrospect is going to come back and figure all this out, right? So, well, there's things we can still do,
right? But
this is an example where, oh my God, I'm selling and I've structured everything poorly.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, we've been approached. Now we're ready to go, and it'd almost be like trying to sell your house, but not really having your act together, and painting a room or getting rid of furniture or whatever. It's the same thing, just much, much more complex. And then finally, I would say the other key mistake, and this is why, and this is going to sound self-promoting, I've been in this long enough now. I'm like, look, I don't care if you hire us or not. Please get an advisor, because the worst thing that can happen during a deal is you starting to miss earnings. Your and forecasts and all that. And it is a full-time job to structure and coordinate a process. Mm-hmm. And if that's what you're doing, it's almost inevitable that you're going to take your eye off the ball.
Yeah.
So it's almost just like, you focus on your golf swing, we'll mow the lawn and do all the other things around it. And again, that's why we hired William Blair, and they were fantastic.
I appreciate you saying all that, because that is definitely the experience that we've had when working with business owners and entrepreneurs. Is they come right up to the 11th hour, and it's like, okay, now I need some estate planning help or wealth planning help, and you're like, the window's kind of closed here. Like we needed to start this conversation a couple of years ago, and if you can do that, now the hard part is getting the attention of the business owner or entrepreneur 2 or 3 years out and getting them to focus on it, because, we're all running businesses and we're busy and there's lots going on and competing for attention. So
if you think about it, there's probably 5 to 10 levers that any business should be thinking about to enhance value. And to just step back and have a retreat or whatever and think about that and maybe bring in some outside resources to who will come in for free.
Right.
And just, hey, these are the things you should be thinking about. It's like, okay, let's work on that. Let's have that be part of our strategic plan. By the way, just to be clear, I almost didn't do any estate planning myself. And I think this is the other thing with a closely held business owner. There's days you feel like you're rich and there's other days you feel like you're poor. And I remember having the meeting where I'm like, I'm kind of embarrassed to be having this meeting because I don't really know if I need to do a lot of planning.
Right.
And they're like, no, this, and we laid it all out. And then very ironically, within 2 years, we ended up doing a transaction and it wasn't even on the radar.
That's a great point. Things change.
So it's understandable that people get in that position. It's just, I think it's important to continue to point that out. Well, think ahead.
And I think the psychology there is the fact that if you are an entrepreneur and go all the way back to the beginning, where you were just scraping by, trying to make payroll and just make it work and just try to get it going. And just, if I can just get to here, and then if I can just get to here. And that's kind of the typical entrepreneurial story. And so for many, you never really ever feel like you've gotten to that place where you can take a deep breath and relax. And the planning justifies where you are. But the reality is your business is getting more valuable every year. And, all of a sudden you start to hit these thresholds where real wealth planning, estate planning can make a difference. But in many ways, and I feel this way sometimes, is I still feel like I'm kind of scraping by, just, like we started in the business in the very beginning, just scraping by, just fighting.
Most people that have successful businesses are worriers.
Yeah.
And the minute you're not worrying, you're going to get punched in the face. Right? So it's just like, okay, I'm taking this very seriously. And, so.
Break that. I love that, because then we're getting to some of the psychology and the why, which obviously gets to the root. Why? Why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think to Scott's point, if you go back to the beginning, you were worried about making payroll. And if you didn't make payroll, it's like, okay, well, I'm just not going to take a paycheck this month, and that's going to be a bummer, but I'll do it.
We'll figure it out.
And I think it's just that owner's mindset. And one of the big things as we've gotten bigger is we just really focus on owner's mindset, because we don't want to turn into Big Co. And I can remember Big Co. Big Co was like, this is a fancy car. Who's paying for it? I don't know. And I just think the minute you lose that grit, that edge, bad things happen. And frankly, the kind of people we're attracting want to be at an entrepreneurial firm. So even though we're getting a little bit bigger, we want that mindset.
So let's ask another question on that, because you've gone from, 8, 9, employees when you bought your other partner out to over 1,000. And I know culture is really important to you, and you've spoken to culture today. How have you been able to maintain your culture as you've gone from 80 team members to over 1,000 and 25 locations across the globe?
The concept is the same, but the methods may change a little. And the concept was always, we're going to be a super transparent, team-oriented, collaborative organization. And I'm a big sports guy, so I've always felt like you got to have a great locker room. It's the difference between winning and lose. I mean, talent will get you a long way, but if you don't have a great locker room,
you will not win championships.
You're not going to win championships.
Yeah.
In the early days, we'd have meetings that included everybody. Now we have quarterly meetings that include everybody, and we share our financials and we do all kinds of things, but we still do anonymous question and answer sessions where any question can be thrown out and we answer them.
Yeah.
And, the only thing that's off limits is, Scott sucks. Why is he still here? We're never going to read a question like that.
Yeah.
Or, why is my personal pay situation what it is? Of course, you just can't answer that in front of 1,000 people. But I think people really appreciate that transparency.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, we've got these core values that we just drive. And I noticed you've got these great core values on your wall. I just think that kind of thing's key. And if people aren't into it, That's okay. It's just not their place.
That's right.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
We get it.
No harm, no foul.
But let's solve that before you start, and not solve it and not realize the poor pick we made or the poor decision that you made to come to our firm.
Yeah.
We're definitely not for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay.
I want to move quickly through, but just I think a lot of listeners, you said there's really only 5 to 10 levers that you can pull to affect valuation. Go through that list, top of mind, and a quick why behind each of those.
Well, let me just use our firm as an example, because every firm's going to be a little bit different.
Love it.
So we think about, what are our levers? Culture is the first one. We've got to maintain or improve our culture. Successful senior hiring, M&A, and the organizational design around that. We've got to continue to make sure that there's a path for everybody in the organization. For us, it's the private equity segment. That's a huge total addressable market. So we're really leaning into that and trying to grow that like a weed. Technology for us is another big one. We want to squeeze hours out of the system. The mind-numbing work that the junior people don't want to do anyway. Yeah. Let's get rid of that. Yeah. Global delivery. We want to follow the sun around the world. We want people in India. We want people in Eastern Europe. We have a what we call a chief revenue office, where the cross-selling function of our firm has to be super effective and efficient. Because we have, like, one of the things for us, and this leads to things like what PE firms and strategic look at are, what's your recurring revenue stream? You know, how resilient is the business in a recession? How chunky is the business? If you're doing this, that's not good.
That's right.
You want to be doing that.
Right.
And then finally, for us, it's the brand. Like, continue to grow the brand. You know, we have a good restaurant, but still a lot of people don't know about it.
Yeah, it's well said.
So, but it's good to have a a good restaurant to start with, rather than a crappy restaurant that a lot of people don't know about. Maybe more people know about the crappy one. That's not good.
Well, there are stats that say with a bad experience, it gets told 10 times more than a good experience, because you expect a good experience if you get a bad experience.
The other thing, and this is much more general, is have a good understanding of the EBITDA margins in your industry and the gross margin in your industry and the operating expenses, because if you're out of whack on any of those, that's not going to be good.
Yeah.
And there's probably reasons that, you need to focus on making more efficient.
Scott, I want you to maybe have the last word here. I just want to say one thing to you and our listeners. One of the things I take away so much from this conversation, Craige, is I loved how you said, this might sound self-promoting, but then Scott immediately reminded you went and got objective help on a core business that you do. And I just find that, in a sense, that humility and that wisdom, that I don't perform surgery on myself. Ego kills so many businesses because they're not even aware that they have blind spots. And of course they have blind spots. So I just want to, I'm not surprised if you're all success. Congratulations. I just find that to be tremendous wisdom on their part.
Yeah, and I would just say the culture piece for me is, really resonates because we're in kind of a growth mode too. And I get the question a lot of, as we grow, and we're nowhere near the size that you guys are, but, as we double in size, how are we going to maintain that culture? And so I really appreciate how intentional you've been about that over all these years, and seems like it's working really well.
So far, so good. We just have to keep it going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Craige, you've probably said, I'm going to give you the last word. How would you coach us to keep our culture as we grow?
As you get bigger, don't give up on the things that you feel strongly about, and become a little bit more process driven on making sure that there's that cultural fit.
Yeah.
Because we definitely, a lot of people have slipped through the cracks over the years, and you just get smarter about, okay, how do we avoid that again? And as you get a little bit bigger, you've got to have that scale in a way, but it's totally doable.
And there's a lot of room for you, because there's massive companies that do this well every day.
Yeah, for sure.
Craige, we're honored. We're grateful. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your wisdom, and wish you all the best success moving forward.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Craige.
Have a great day. Thank you.